But first, thank you for all being here. You know, that's important. I mean, to have you here in the audience as well as people in the virtual audience, that's the most important thing for us, because topics like this get better the more we tell them, because we learn from you. Obviously, Bruce is here to share
Because I lived
his
through it.
knowledge, and he lived through it as a 7-year-old. And, you know, I got to learn about the topic through my grandfather and his friends, which is basically how I learned much of the history of Reading. So we kind of merged the August and the October floods together. That's why we have two, because when I started talking about this, I really didn't know about the August floods until I went down to Stanford to the men's club. And I gave a presentation on the October floods. And I had 3 individuals in the middle rows shaking their heads violently. And I knew that they didn't agree with whatever I was saying. So I pulled one of these and said, what's going on? Like, what am I saying wrong? And they said, it wasn't in October, it was in August. And I know because I was going to a Red Sox game and I couldn't get there because all the roads are blown out. And I said, wow, all right. And so that led me to further research. And then I learned about those floods, and wow, like, you know, the rivers up there were a lot larger than the Norwalk and the Still River here. So I just wanted to share photos of that and knowledge of that, because those August events really impacted, in my opinion, the dams and the watershed here, because they must have put a big stress on our current dams and facilities. So when the October floods came into play, they were definitely fatigued. And you know,
Our rivers were full, our reservoirs were full, and the ground was saturated. So there wasn't any place for the water to go except out of the riverbanks.
so I'm going to try to walk through the slides here. Just click. Okay, so this is one of the books. So this is the book that I knew. This book is The Floods of October. This was in every house that I went into as a kid. We're going to donate this to the Mark Twain Library. Bruce and I have signed it and dedicated it. It's a clean copy, and it has a lot of great photos that we didn't want to overpower you with too many photos tonight, but if you're interested, it's here for you. So this was the first one. This was the second one. This one shows that there were 2 floods. So this one says in October and August, and it notes all of the towns that were involved. This came from people, you know, I had talks providing them to me and sharing information to me about both floods. Connie and Diane were 2 hurricanes that caused all the trouble in August. I've kind of circled here to show that, you know, they could have gone this way, but they waggled back and they hit us both, and they were back to back. Bruce had first-hand knowledge of those hurricanes in August.
Yep.
And, you know, what they really did was basically overpower the watersheds. You can see how much rain fell up top, but we still had a decent amount here down below. So these are the August floods. And then overall, you can see the precipitation was much higher than normal. So these are the reds of the normal, and this is what we saw from July into October. This is the cause up north. So these are, you know, the larger rivers. My favorite name is the Mad River because it was really mad. And you know, yeah, I've said that, you know, the Still River existed up there. You had the Naugatuck, the Farmington,
Housatonic.
Housatonic, Northfield. You know, not only were these waters spilling into the town, but they're running at a rate, as you can probably notice, at 50 miles an hour. So it was a huge devastation. Yes. I believe it's Winstead.
This is not.
Yeah, this is Naugatuck.
Naugatuck. This is a mixture of pictures of Naugatuck, Torrington, things of that nature, Winstead, Winchester, Waterbury. But you can see that these rivers were running not only very swollen, but hot.
Well, we also got really deep valleys, and you put 20 inches of water on the ground is one thing, but you make it all run downhill into the valleys, and all of a sudden you've got 10, 15, 20 feet of water.
So this was the devastation up north.
That's Washington Depot.
It's from transportation and on all levels was just devastated in the August floods.
That's Danbury. That's Rose Street in Danbury.
Someone needs Valentine Ale. This is by Winstead.
That's Winston.
Winstead lost all the roads. Many of the roads were concrete and they all got ripped up in this kind of storm.
Winston, when they got finished when the storm was finished, it looked like they just dug a trench right down the middle of the street. It was about 5 foot deep.
Yep. This is Waterbury. Another picture of Waterbury. Torrington, I believe. Another picture of Torrington. I mean, you can only imagine the amount of damage and how much work went into putting back together again railroad systems. They did it a lot faster than they would in the present day, I'll tell you that.
It didn't go up for bids, and there was no talk about environment. They just did it.
But you can see the damage. I believe it's up in Torrington, full buildings being taken down because they're undermined. This is kind of the aftermath in Winstead. I mean, I can't even imagine how long that would take to clean up in the present day. Right. No, it was a devastating storm. 100%. So even more devastating, knowing what I know, is that gentleman in the hat is Abraham Ribicoff. He was the governor. He had started in January of this year, and this was his first fund. I believe he was our 80th governor, but the way that he ran both storms really was appreciated by the public. He was good about getting out there and talking individually to the people and the businesses and really getting a firm understanding of the issues. And he took care of it, and he'd have to take care of it again in October, but he would go on to become a U.S. Senator and have a very solid political career, probably following the events for how he handled it. No, not at all. And that's what Bruce is going to touch upon. So round two is here. This is Danbury. I mean, buses aren't going to run, but maybe some, boats will. But Bruce has done a nice job of looking at the weather reports, and the weather reports really didn't indicate anything really substantial heading into October.
There was no indication of any weather coming really, other than it was supposed to rain on Friday. And the storm lasted from Friday the 14th all the way through the night, all the way through Saturday the 15th, and into Sunday morning the 16th. The Bridgeport Post in the morning edition of Friday said, "Rain today, clearing tonight." By the late edition, and there's one thing that most city newspapers publish at least twice a day. By the late edition, they had upped the forecast to rain throughout the night, maybe possibly as much as 3 inches, clearing and sunny on Saturday. On Saturday morning, it was drizzle today, clearing later. It's just absolutely amazing. If we think today that weather forecasting, they don't forecast very well 3 or 4 days out, they couldn't forecast 12 hours out then. You had no satellites. First satellites weren't launched until 1957, and then those satellites never became used as weather satellites until probably the late 60s. There was no weather radar. The first weather radar that was used by the National Weather Service was in 1959. So it's basically, they had a barometer, they had a thermometer, they looked out the window and see which directions the clouds were coming from, and then they called the city or cities that are other weather stations that were maybe 100 miles in that direction. What's the weather like? And then they could predict what was going to happen that day a little bit. Sure. Well, it was extremely high tides. This is the one reason that I think there was less people that got drowned or got washed away on the coast, because they were expecting high tides. And that was in the Friday papers. There was talking a lot about unusually high tides. I know my dad had a business in Westport, and it was right on the Saugatuck River. And they knew that anytime there was high tides, that they had cars that were in basements. They had to move the cars. And luckily on Friday afternoon, they moved the cars up to high ground, because by Saturday morning, they would have all already been inundated. But that's the only indication that they had. This back in the 50s and prior to that, all meteorologists were men, all hurricanes were named after women. There was tropical. This was a tropical storm, and they didn't have any names for tropical storms. As a matter of fact, I think the Hartford Current called this a sneak gale. Yeah, it was pretty close.
It was definitely sneaky.
But it rained all day Friday. It rained all day Saturday. And in Georgetown, there was a meteorologist in Georgetown that recorded it, and there was 0.6 of an inch by Friday at 5:30. 2 more inches fell between then and midnight. 2.3 inches fell between up until noon on Saturday, and 7.82 inches fell afternoon on Saturday. There was a total in Georgetown of 12.67 inches in a little over 30 hours. So it was a pretty amazing amount. And that wasn't the most. I think Ridgefield recorded the most, I think somewhere around 13.5 or 14 inches.
Right, but Branchville, yeah, think about Branchville and Georgetown are definitely much lower. So like, again, water running downhill is the biggest danger, and that's kind of why from us down into Wilton and Norwalk, we saw the most damage from that. And also all the waterways. This is in Ridgefield, but just down the hill here, below us, probably look exactly the same. All the streams and rivers became swollen and ran hot. And, because knowledge of the storm wasn't really well communicated, people went out and did what they normally would do.
Everybody went about their normal day on Saturday.
They would go out to dinner, they would go see friends. And that was the danger. And then they didn't know how bad it was, because, now we're connected to news all the time through our phones and through the TVs. But back then it was totally different. So they didn't know any better. And that's, you were going to talk about the Phoenix family. And that was kind of the reason why that happened.
You're going to talk about the day in Georgetown on Saturday, and then I'll talk about my day.
So I'll talk about the day in Georgetown. So the day in Georgetown, as he noted, water started to build up. Things are starting to flood. Houses are definitely not going to be able to hold anyone, and there's gas tanks and there's septic tanks flowing into the rivers. And so like any small town, the fire departments and the people associated with the town get involved right away. They start to basically take people out any way they can, whether it be a large truck or a boat, but people need to be evacuated and placed on higher ground. So that was happening very early in Georgetown. And, that's just the thing that we kind of don't see in the present day, but that was big then. People were really concerned about each other, and volunteerism was a really big thing. So that's kind of what you saw early on in the day. And then as the night progressed, it got more dangerous. But luckily, because they acted so quickly, people had gone to better places and had been put into areas that were safer temporarily. So that was a big thing that I'm pretty surprised about, because information back then was most difficult. You didn't have cell phones, you didn't have email. You really had to go by word of mouth or phone calls. And some of the phones were on party lines. So it was tough to get to everyone all at once. And so, I think because not only the Georgetown Fire Departments, but also the Reading Fire Departments all got involved, and there's so many people that volunteered in all of those. I think that played a really solid role in protecting people as we went into the evening.
I know, and Saturday for us was pretty much a normal day. My grandparents lived at the Saugatuck Reservoir Dam, and we lived on Sport Hill Road in Reading. And a typical day for my family was we would go and visit my grandparents generally on the weekend. My dad would work, and my mother and I went over there, and we spent the day at the dam. And my grandfather was getting a little nervous because the water was really running over the spillway at quite a rate. Because it was connected with the Bridgeport Hydraulic Company, it was connected and talking to the people in Easton. In Easton, they had a real fear that the dam at Easton Lake would give. The dam was only about 26 years old, but they'd never had that much water running over the spillway. The spillway wasn't that much lower than the top of the dam. There was actually water lapping at the top of the dam trying to get over. And water was starting to come into the filtration system that they had underneath, right at the bottom of the dam. So they had all the valves open to let as much water through as possible. I remember my dad coming home up to my grandparents' house, probably about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They had closed because it was raining so hard. And he told my mother that we should probably head home to Reading because the roads were getting bad. And we had a dog that needed to be taken care of. So we got in the car, we left my mother's car in Weston, and we drove and we came up Westport Road. I don't know how many of you are familiar crossing Westport Road at Route 58. And then you go across the little section of the northern part of the Hemlock Reservoir. I remember vividly standing up in the back seat and looking out the front window, and there was no road. The reservoir had completely inundated the road at that point. But in Connecticut at the time, it was a state highway, and they had guardrail posts were about this high, and then there was 2 sets of wires that ran through them, and all the guardrail posts were painted white on the top. My father stopped and he looked, he could still see the guardrails, and he could see that the water was up to about the bottom of the first wire. So it was probably about 10 or 12 inches deep. He decided we needed to get to Reading, that we were going home. We drove through it, and it was just like driving off a boat ramp into the lake, except we made it through, we made it all the way home. But I said, that's something that's stuck in my mind for the last 67 years. So, I remember seeing that and I go, that was a pretty scary thing. That evening, the rain was so hard that we started to notice that cars were going down the street into the Aspetuck, into the valley where the Aspetuck ran. And then we were returning and going back up the street. So we figured that, my father figured that, there must be a lot of water down there going across the river at Stepney Road. So he got in the car and he drove down, came back kind of white-faced and said, it's about 150 feet across right now and probably about 7 or 8 feet deep. They had just put in a new bridge on Stepney Road, literally probably 6 weeks before. The bridge held, both sides of the roads were gone. There was one piece of pavement that was probably about 40 feet long that was lifted up and wrapped right around a telephone pole. And it stood there for the next 3 or 4 weeks. So he said that was a really, really interesting thing to see. Now, Saturday night, it got really bad. People have been going about their normal day, and the Blairs up the street, I don't know, if you go up Great Pasture, I'm not very familiar, there's a little elephant in front of one of the barns up here. That's where the Blairs lived. Their friends were Edward and Veronica Phoenix. They lived on Fox Run Road. They were over to the Blair's house for dinner that night, and they got a call around 9 o'clock from their son Teddy. And Teddy, they lost the electricity at the house, and he asked his mom, "When are you coming home?" So they said, "We're leaving right now." They got in their car and they left, and they crossed the road here, and they went down to the little bridge right here where the Saugatuck goes, and it was inundated. I don't know whether it's a pretty steep thing. I don't know whether they saw that there was too much water there or not, but anyway, they tried to cross in the bridge. The car was swept off the bridge. Both of them got out of the car. He drowned immediately. she managed to hold on to trees for as long as 5 hours as people tried to rescue her. The fire department was called by the residents who lived upstairs right here. Her name was Muller. She went under the name of Susan Adams. She was a TV cook. And at that time, this building sat right on Diamond Hill Road and sat much closer to Route 53. They moved it when they put the addition on down here. So they moved it further away. But she looked out the window and she could see the headlights coming out of the river. So I said, she called the fire department. There was at least 30 people here trying to rescue these people for, I said, over 5 hours. And they got within 20 feet of her when she finally had to let go and drown. So,
No, it's probably one of the roughest stories locally
Yeah.
of, the entire situation, really.
The cars at that time did not have electronic ignitions. If you got your distributor wet and the car conked out, you were done. You weren't going to start it. You could just hope that, somebody would come along and push you out or something like that. But it was dangerous to drive through deep water at that time.
No, the discussion is about cars now and, cars then. And, Bruce is a car guy. So,
The comment was that cars were taller then and they could go through deeper water, which is true.
but that's how deep the water was. So that was the battle. I mean, this
It
is,
wasn't quite that deep.
well, this is Route 7. So this is down, between
This is just
Ri-
south of Stonehenge
yeah.
on Route 7.
So it's definitely fit for boats, but not cars. But that's kind of like locally what we're looking at, probably during Saturday. And so this was the issue that, they were dealing with. But you can see, yeah, regardless of how high they were, the waters were definitely higher. And it just got worse. I think preemptively, just to discuss what happened in the evening, was that you need to really, visually zoom out and think about how much water is above Georgetown and Branchville and Wilton. Starting at Great Pond, we obviously know how large that water source is and that watershed, but above it, there's even more. It's Bennett's Pond. There's a lot of water, more than you would really think. And if you want to look at it, just Google Earth it. And so everything that's pressing upon the big bodies of water and the dams that have been there for literally centuries are stressed.
And we'd had 6 inches of water through Friday night and into Saturday, almost 8 inches of water on Saturday night.
Right.
In the early part of Saturday night, which is really what did us in.
Yeah, and this, this is on Route 7. You can see the damage to the bridges. They got hurt pretty good. I mean, at least, they about 12 feet of water in through the factory, over $1 million worth of damage.
But they were closed for what, about 3 months, weren't they?
2 or 3 months.
Right.
The interesting thing about that is, obviously it's still October, but they still produce 2.6 million miles of wire. So that would stretch around the world or the globe 104 or 5 times.
No.
Yeah, we're getting, so what we're doing right now is just, we're getting into the effects of the late night portion of the storm. So this is when the dams along the Norwalk River let go. And so what you're going to look at is basically, the main one to consider is Great Pond. And when that lets go, you're going to get basically the best visual I can do is an avalanche of water flying down that Norwalk River Valley, taking out everything in its way, everything in its path, and then continuing on down into Wilton and Norwalk.
So Main Street in Georgetown had about 4 foot of water on it in the middle of the afternoon on Saturday. When the dam let go, there was over 10 feet of water on Main Street in Georgetown.
So that's like a Bruce and a half.
Yeah.
But, in all honesty, in respect for the dam, it wasn't necessarily the dam that let go, but as you can see, it was what was alongside the dam. So the dam is here, and what was beside it was what gave way. And that's pretty much what ripped through everything. You can see this house over here, almost taken completely off its foundation. And that was really the damaging blow for Georgetown, Wilton, and Norwalk. But this occurs at 11 o'clock at night.
This is over in.
Bennett Factory.
Mhm.
Yep. So this would just release it. The other thing that happened, or you need to consider, is that just a year before this, the 107 expansion occurs. So what used to be an open watershed is now
Another dam.
another dam,
with
you know,
two culverts through it.
and they're obviously not large enough to take on this volume of water. Not only do you have the Norwalk, but above it, just above the Meadow Ridge where the Nazaros were, was another pond, Perry's Pond, and that let go. So that went in through Brookside and down. So you're getting multiple streams and rivers and dams exploding at the same time, and it's in the middle of the night. So if you can only imagine what it must have been like for someone in Wilton or Norwalk, that it's 11 o'clock at night.
The one was washed out.
Everything was washed out.
Both the-
107 would be like both,
Both the Norwalk and the Saugatuck. Because it was about, what, 150 feet down here that was just gone. The road was, the bridge held, but both sides of the road, and there was a landslide going up towards your dad's house, up on, towards Glen Hill.
everything.
Everything.
I mean, just below this, you had Conry's lumber. All of the lumber in Conry's yard went downstream. And we know that Harold Conry had a great sense of humor, because the following, Monday or Tuesday, he contacted all his customers downstream and asked if they got their delivery of lumber, which is, solid. You mentioned people in danger that were taken to higher ground. This individual lived in Westport, and their family's house was next to the brook that was flooded, and it filled the cellar and about 18 inches on the first floor. The National Guard evacuated my family, mother, father, little sister, me, my dog, in a rowboat from our front porch to a truck to higher ground, Greens Farms Elementary School, and then they spent the night there on cots. And do I know of the shots that were given? Typhoid shots were the ones that were given. Locally, the typhoid shots were given by Wilton and their
They were given in
their
August.
health,
to
their
the
health
valley.
department. That was the thing. No, and in this too, we got relatively lucky that the sewer lines that ran across these waterways didn't explode as well with it, because that would have sent another set of problems downstream. So
Most of the repairs, other than the bridges, most of the repairs were made within 2 weeks.
but you've got to think about, the time was so different.
I'm talking about
know,
infrastructure repairs,
so-
not buildings.
Like, so this is just below the factory, obviously. This car is just, this road is heading on what we know as 57 today. This couple was stuck there. She was pregnant. Conry's hardware store was
Then
where the lumber yard
right over here.
would be over there. Someone broke into Conry's to get basically a rope to stabilize the car and get her out of that. But, I think the big thing in terms of like Georgetown and Reading is that everyone was so into, this was where we live, this is where we work, we need to fix this. So it was all hands on deck. Right now, everyone would be on Facebook going, oh my God, you're the kid. Yeah. And, I can say that because I've been first selectman for 10 years. So, it was a different time period.
Every contractor was out there with their.
Everyone was there.
Trucks, and they just kicked in.
And
It
a
wasn't
lot
a
of,
matter of, how much are we gonna charge for this? We just need to fix it. They just
Yeah.
did it.
and this is where we work. And that was a special thing about that time period. And that's why, for the most part, 2 months or 3 months, we're back on our feet. It's pretty amazing, but it's also, pretty awesome, in my opinion.
No, Connie and Diane were in August. There was no name for the October storm. The October storm was the 14th and 15th in the morning of the 16th of October. It was Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. In August, I don't remember the exact dates, but one was the 13th, and I think the other one was the 20th. They were just about 1 week apart.
This would be an example of what, Mr. Connery's
Yeah,
lumberyard
delivery.
would have been. And this was, trying to get people through school buses and sometimes plow trucks and heavy duty equipment, getting people to, basically safe zones like schools and things on higher ground, fire department. This is on Route 7.
Yeah.
Less,
It
no,
was
less.
but it wasn't tremendous. It wasn't a tremendous difference. No, I mean, Reading population was probably about 6,000.
This was Danbury, just to give you an idea of the levels of the Still River.
This is
So-
Main and White Street, corner of Main and White Street.
This is one you
This- yeah,
provided.
This is
just below
this is the
Bridgewater.
August flood, and this is in New Milford. This is the Memorial Bridge in New Milford. You can see how deep the water was in the Housatonic then.
This is down in Wilton. So you can see, like, as you get, lower, the problems got higher. So yeah, there was a couple, at least a week and a half of taking water out of basements once the water receded.
You've also got to remember during that October flood, the rivers, the Norwalk River, the Saugatuck, and the Aspetuck, their headwaters are all in the Danbury area. So I mean, you didn't have rivers that were flowing from 40 miles away. These rivers all got filled from this area because of this amount of rain and did this much damage between here and the coast.
Yeah, and it was unfortunate. I mean, just on Main Street alone in Georgetown, you had some businesses that had just opened up either a week before or 3 weeks before. I mean, the barber shop, the liquor store, the bakery. I mean, they had just opened. Even Mr. Driscoll's real estate office had just established themselves there because the 107 project had just happened and been completed the year before. So all these new businesses completely leveled, and Bonds Manure Store, which was the staple since I think the 20s, that got completely destroyed. And the only real grocery store in town was Harold Connery's on Old Mill. And to his credit, he gave everyone what he had. That's another indication of
Yeah, he didn't
things that
profit
was-
at all from it.
No, not at all. No, he lost money hand over fist. But that was the thing. Character was strong back then.
Well, it could. I think this guy, I'm pretty sure his name was Mugavarno. He used to be a barber in Ridgefield, and then he decided that he wanted to own a restaurant. And if you can see the sign there, steak dinners were $2.50.
Yeah, but you can see the devastation for, the cars that tried to get across. I mean, this is probably a good indication of.
Yeah, it looks like a
what it
piece
was
of junk, but it's a brand new 55 Chevrolet station wagon.
Exactly. Yeah,
Oh.
and that's the beauty of it. I mean, and like, I think the only reason why we don't have as many photos as the August storms was just the time frame. I think they were obviously more popular, but also, is in the daytime. And this is the poor, governor, again, I'll leave this as our last slide. So Governor Ribicoff, again, like I said, this is his first year in office. And once again, he's got to go after this once again, within a month and a half of what he just,
But within
Had to deal with.
within the first 2, 3, 4 days, he was in virtually every town via helicopter and
Yeah.
walked around every town and talked to every first selectman. And so what do you need?
and but not only that, but also the business owners. So they flew in and they landed in Gibbon Benton School, which is on, in the Wilton side of Georgetown. And then, Harold Samuelson was the first selectman at that moment in time. And he met with the president Mulliken of Gilbert and Bennett. But then he also went to, other store owners like Bert Kearns. That was kind of, he passed away that year. And because his store was completely devastated. He would like, we know it as the Granite Church now, but Bert Kearns' store was around that same area. And so they got hit pretty hard. But he took the time to talk to the public, and then he followed up on those requests. And I think that's why he was so successful as a politician. I don't know. I know he was the 80th governor. He was the first Jewish governor that we had, and his career just expanded from there. But yeah, because this was not, he had to go to every single town. The impact, we're just talking about us. I mean, the silver mine heads down to the Merritt Parkway, and Merritt Parkway has serious issues too. And that was the major conduit in terms of transportation. So he had to deal with that too, but he did take the time to come to the smaller towns like us and discuss our problems too. So he didn't focus on the larger, he focused on the overall. And I think that's why he was successful.
The Silver Mine River actually undercut the Merritt Parkway, and they had to put Bailey bridges on the Merritt Parkway to reopen it. They had that done within a week. 95 wasn't built until 57 was when they built that.
And that's the other interesting thing, like that's looped into this. Like, there's that thing, that quote, I never waste a good crisis. Well, this is the same exact time frame. Most of the roads and even parking lots were concrete at this moment in time. So asphalt and asphalt lobbyists got involved. And then I believe 2 years later, there was an act. What was the Interstate Highways Act? And so
Well,
every
that was actually in 53, but 57 is when they built the Connecticut Turnpike. They built the Connecticut Turnpike in a little less than a year from the New York border to New Haven. And you look at all the bridges that they had to build, it's like, it's amazing. I mean, look when the Mianus River Bridge collapsed. It took them 2 years to rebuild that. Of course, they were using the road at the same time. But it just, we want to kind of finish this with the aftermath on Sunday. And I think one of the most interesting stories was one of the delivery men for Marsh Dairy in Easton lived in Weston. And he would normally drive across and go across Center Road into Easton. He gets to Center Road, and the Center Road bridge is gone. He gets to Silver Hill Road, which is the next street, and that bridge is under about 5 feet of water. He gets to Valley Road, that bridge is gone. He gets to Meeker Hill, he goes down Meeker Hill, he can cross that bridge, he goes down into the valley, and the Stepney Road is missing. And he didn't have to go, because he would have had to go the same way, but the bridge at Church Hill was gone. He ended up driving to Bethel to get to Easton and having coming down through Newtown. In all, Reading lost a total of 8 bridges, 50 culverts. The total cost of the town of Reading was estimated at a grand total of $50,000, which is amazing for road work. Okay. You couldn't do one culvert for that today. Easton lost 3 bridges, and I don't know how many other roads. There was probably 4 or 5 other roads that were closed. They said there was a landslide right down here. Everything was repaired for roads. The schools were closed for 1 week. All the bridges themselves, some of those bridges took a year to replace, but the bridges that weren't wiped out were inspected, and both sides of the road were put back together, and they were all operational within 1 week.
No, it's obviously the costs have gone up, but
yeah,
it is. I think that we've definitely had some changes that, helps, but yeah, it is still vulnerable to this day. Most of the towns that really were devastated changed things completely. Mad River has its own dam now. I drove through Winstead today, and the towns up here and the rivers down here, everything's underneath Hartford and Torrington now. Same thing, just to try to prevent that.
well, Danbury was, the Still River was put underneath and put in channels. So the Still River is
Yeah,
just-
all these big, box channels, concrete. So most of these towns, I think, either have dams or that in place to prevent it. Yeah, I think, yeah, we definitely in Georgetown could see something. But, this was a little bit different. I think the only reason why Georgetown really suffered was because, once Great Pond let go, then that you just can't.
That and that in 57, 53. I mean,
Yeah.
that really dammed it up.
So, yeah, that was the major issue, was the volume of water coming down. Yes. Yeah, and there's been a lot of great work. The Norwalk River Watershed Association has been doing a great job of just helping educate people about the dangers of, even just putting leaves in the stream and making sure that there's riparian buffers and things of that nature. So, I think we're more knowledgeable of the dangers and that helps. But storms like this, I mean, thank God we now do have radar and satellite, but yeah, I think I mean, I remember a couple of years back, Branchville and Georgetown had a pretty good scare in recent times.
Any other
Any
questions?
questions? Like, so we
Yeah.
kind of want to open up to question and answer now. I mean, we were told we're going to keep it, Brent and Bruce just talk too much.
Hey,
Um,
look, we did it in 46 minutes. I mean, that's a record for us. Well, the land was saturated, but one of the biggest things is all the reservoirs and anything that was behind a dam was still full, which is very unusual for October. Usually by the time you get to September and October, most of the reservoirs and stuff, they're down 10, 12 feet. These were dead full, because I remember at my grandparents' house, there was water from August on, there was water constantly running over the spillway, and that never happened.
Because look at September. I mean, September was even higher than August.
Well, even look at July. I mean, there was no big hurricanes, but I mean, July was still almost about 30% probably more moisture in July than would have been normal.
But like Bruce was sharing, the newspapers and the meteorologists were like, yeah, it's all good. They're fine.
I don't know, so they were fine, but they were just clueless as to how to predict weather. I think 7 people died in Fairfield County from that.
Yeah.
2 of them here in town.
Overall,
It's remarkable how few people died. But it's also-
87 overall, and $200 million in damage for the
but
both
that's
storms.
including August.
Yeah, that's what
Right,
I'm saying.
but the
which
October
is
floods was
incredible.
7 people in Fairfield County.
Yeah.
Which is, I thought was amazing. I think one of the reasons it wasn't worse here is because when the Bridgebite Hydraulic Company took all the lands and they took all the mill ponds, they blew most of the dams up. So there was a lot less dams to fail. So, because once one of those smaller dams would fail, it was like a dominoes effect. And, it just got worse and worse. But I said, the rivers ran fairly high, but I said, that's why Georgetown was so severely affected, because the dam did give away. 2 dams gave away.
Right.
Yeah.
Did Kennewood overflow into the Housatonic?
Well, not really, because it really can't overflow into the Housatonic, because it goes down. There's 2, what do they call those tubes? Pipes. Yeah. That's the technical term we were looking for.
Engineers. Yeah.
But there's very few streams that run into Candlewood to fill it. Most of Candlewood is filled from the Housatonic. So I said, I'm sure the lake was probably full, but I don't.
It may have
don't-
actually helped because they sucked that water up through that big black pipe by the power station. So that actually may have actually been beneficial.
Yeah, I don't know, because usually by that time of the year, they start to lower the lake, but October is probably still a little early to lower the lake, but today it would be definitely early to lower the lake, but I don't know, that's a good question. That we don't know the answer to. They survived okay. Particularly the October storm, the Housatonic, it flooded, but it wasn't as bad as it was during the August storms. So August storms dumped more rain to the north. And I just said they actually fared worse but the dams were fine.
They did okay. They broke records. So, if you look it up, you'll see an asterisk next to it that was the
If you
record high.
If you look at the water going down the spillways at Stevenson Dam, I mean, it was pretty impressive. It looked like Niagara Falls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, they broke records on, I'd say, like at least 60% of those dams.
And one of the problems then was downstream is the people downstream weren't happy because they opened up all the spillways and they let as much water go through. The people downstream that had built right alongside the river, those houses went away.
And most of the questions just, we just answered were, did all the dams along the Housatonic and things of that nature fail? And they didn't, but their levels are record levels for the most part in all of those dams.
I mentioned Easton, they were worried about Easton, and he said Easton held up fine. What they had to do is they were able to divert some of the water that was going towards their filtration plant, and it kind of solved the problem. They have an unusual situation there that the spillway is on one side, and then it comes down and it's that whole valley is all stone, so it follows the stone ledges and stuff down, so it can't even carve a deeper path. So it just has to run and it flows out to the sides quite a bit into the Mill River as it goes down there.
Yeah, I mean, if you go through Farmington on Route 4 through Unionville, there's actually monuments to the houses that used to be there because they got completely swept away into the Farmington River.
My dad talks about the August floods that they would go to where the Shakespeare Theater used to be alongside of the Housatonic River, where Sikorsky had their first plant. And they said they would watch rail cars and houses and stuff floating down the Housatonic that had come from Waterbury and Naugatuck. They floated right out to Long Island Sound. They actually became navigation havers for a while. And 38, if you go back to 38, talk about being surprised. Nobody had any idea that, at least these two hurricanes, they knew hurricanes were coming. But in 38, they didn't know there was any hurricanes because it had passed between the United States and Bermuda, and it was out to sea. The only people who knew there was a hurricane out there in bad weather were the ship captains. Nobody else had any idea. Everybody went, that's why so many people lost their lives in the New London area, because they were going about their business on a Saturday afternoon. And all of a sudden it started to rain, and the winds came and washed so much water on shore that I don't know how, there was thousands of people that died in Connecticut and Rhode Island.
Well, I mean,
That's it.
as always, we thank you guys for
Yeah,
being
thank you
here,
very much.
both in person and out there. And we thank the library because, the whole point of doing this is to keep the story moving. You got to tell the story, because once the story stops being told, it disappears. And you see that all over America. So I think that's, you guys shared your stories and we shared ours, and now it's recorded and it'll go to YouTube, and, people can listen to this and think about this. And that's why I think these programs are important, just for that reason. And then for me, I did this with my grandfather and his friends, and I can go back and listen to them. And yeah, but I'm so happy that I did that. So this book is here for you guys. You guys can look at all the fun pictures. There's a lot more than what we shared, and yeah, keep sharing your stories. Sure. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thanks, everybody.